what we see is that there is a value code that people follow, either unconsciously from birth, by upbringing, by family circumstances, by their. Very often people say, I've always seen my mother wearing handlooms. I've always seen my grandmother in Kanjivanams. Things which we have picked up as an aesthetic quality of our own style of dressing and clothing, and the choices we make, which were influenced by the upbringing, which were influenced by the background of our upbringing, or by the background of the place that we work. In earlier times, when you went to a place of employment, you normally had a career in a similar line of work, even if you scaled up your professional qualification or your position in an organization, which also followed a certain dress code, right? So if you became the CEO of a company, maybe there are certain meetings where you go in a coat and a coat suit with a shoe and with a tie, or you don't, right? There were no gray areas in your style of dressing in almost every which way that you were defined. And because Indian milieu represents largely 30 to 40 years of concentrating on economic stability or economic growth, it's only now we have come to a place where we can actually have conversations about what economic opulence is impacted on our consumption patterns. These questions that come about sustainability and overconsumption and minimalism is all coming because of economic opulence. If we were not in a place where we have all had our stomach full and a little more in terms of what we purchase and what we keep, this was not a point of contention at all. So if you look at the people who work in a genuinely middle class, who most upper class people call as the lower middle class, who are the people who are doing who are earning anywhere between 20 to 50K a month. And trust me when I say this to you, that these people have to really make ends meet by pinching on every note, and they really can't look at clothing as a consumption pattern, as conscious consumption, because it is something that they take for granted. But anybody who's outside this bracket, who's not making ends meet on a monthly basis to fulfill the family needs, fulfill the responsibilities, and in many cases it's not even a nuclear family, they have dependent elders, they have somebody who's dependent in the family who's got to live with them, not necessarily a joint family, but they're responsible for the upkeep of someone else. Thinking about clothing in the dialogues that we are having is not a possibility. It doesn't make sense to them. But once you have arrived, and once you have stayed at a place where you have arrived, which means that your mode of transport is under your control, you have a roof above your head, need not necessarily be a house that you built, but it's a rent that you can easily pay, a certain disposable income that you can choose what to invest in, whether it's in electronics, whether it's in a holiday, whether it is in learning a skill set, developing a new hobby, right? Now that is the space where we need to ask, hey, have you thought about where your clothes come from, and are you a conscious consumer of your clothing? If we have been pushing people to think about food from a medical perspective, today we are asking people to choose food from a lifestyle perspective. This is the space where we need to ask people to choose clothing in a more conscious manner. Now flipping back to where we were talking about when you make your clothes, with the new economic opulence status that we were talking about, these transition points in your life are no longer one from school to college or college to workplace. Even at your workplace, there are a lot of different places where you've got to transform who you are based on whether you're in sales, you're in marketing, you are in production, you're actually on a shop floor, or you are out visiting sites, you're out putting out small fires with your clients. The way you carry yourself and the way you project yourself matters, and the uniformity with which an engineer carries himself is no longer applicable for a lawyer, for a banker, for a professor, you need to differentiate yourself in some fashion or the other so that you are noticed and your own growth path happens. Add to this the combination of mental health, and I do not know who I am anymore. I do not feel purposeful in the life that I am leading, so I'm thinking of doing a startup. You chuck a very right job suddenly after 10 years, 8 years of working, and you want to find a new me. All these new variations which has come, there is no clothing bottom line that you can apply to all this. So it leads to a lot of possibilities for exploring in this area. Are there any guidelines for doing this? Yes, there is a need to. But when you look at startups, there is no, this is how startup people dress, for example.